Remember that case of the Just Stop Oil protesters? They were sentenced, wasn't they, to 5 years and 4 years. Well, now, more than 1,200 artists, athletes, celebrities, you name it, they've written this open letter to the Attorney General. They demand, I quote, an urgent meeting to discuss these sentences. They reckon it was inhumane. What do you think to this, Jake?
I think actions have consequences, Michelle, and all of these individuals, it wasn't their first attempt, it wasn't their second, it wasn't their third, in fact, it was their fourth offence, and they had been repeatedly warned that if they did this over and over again, they would have a custodial sentence. So it's not like they weren't warned. And also, let's look at the disruption that they caused. Their blockading of the M25 cost over £1.1 million in policing, cost £700,000 to the economy. That's not even the worst bit of it. A patient who had an aggressive form of cancer missed his hospital diagnosis by 2 months because he couldn't get to his hospital appointments. People miss weddings, funerals, flights. Look, these people, they believe in what they say, that's fine. But if they're going to go beyond the law to disrupt our lives, actions has consequences, and the law applies to all of us equally. I think the sentences were right.
You say that one of them just had a few previous convictions. Actually, one of them had 11. The one that was sentenced to the highest, about 5 years, he had 11 previous convictions. Ella, your thoughts?
I don't have any sympathy for Just Stoop Oil or Extinction Rebellion or their politics, but I think their sentencing was wrong, and that's because I care very deeply about the freedom of protest. And I think, Jake, you've just given a good example of where the issues lie. You talked about disruption to people's lives. Any effective protest must be disruptive. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. And, whether it's the farmers that paraded through Westminster, bringing all the traffic to a near standstill the other day on an issue almost directly opposite to Extinction Rebellion, or, there were truckers who stopped parts of motorways in favour of Article 50, invoking Article 50 around the Brexit issue. Remember that way back then? There are lots of various issues that could be hampered if crackdowns on protests are allowed to continue. You think we have to keep some space between the issue, which is these climate activists, very arrogant, very sort of extremist, talking about the world burning, lighting on fire. I have no sympathy with them at all. I completely disagree with them. And the abstract idea of the freedom to protest. And if you look at the kind of legislation that's been brought in under the previous government, crackdowns on what kind of protest can be allowed, what constitutes a noisy protest, increased police powers for cracking down on protest, all of that is bad news for those of us who might find ourselves in a situation, maybe under a Labour government, vehemently disagreeing with an immigration policy, or, what happens if Keir Starmer, God forbid, decides that he wants to go full rejoiner and tries to bring us back into the European Union. I want to be able to go out on the streets with my fellow citizens and protest that without fear of being put in jail for 5 years.
Every single week. Every single week. I mean, that's the thing is, the first thing is they protest on national infrastructure, and in the law, and this goes back a very long way, the government has drawn a line that if you disrupt airports, motorways, major piece of national infrastructure, you have to be treated more harshly because that grinds the whole country to a halt. So they pick the biggest bits of national infrastructure to protest on, and they were doing it every single week. Look, if they want to walk on Wimbledon and throw their orange bits of paper out, it's just annoying and the tennis gets delayed. That's not quite the same as grinding the economy to a halt, making people miss hospital appointments, stopping people going to work on national infrastructure.
I think that there's always a fine line and an intricate line to be drawn on a case-by-case basis between what's protest and what's public nuisance. And Just Stoop Oil have continuously crossed that line. And I'm not suggesting that there should be no consequences, but I think what happened within this case was there was a big sort of deal made out of the fact that they dared to disrupt. And I think that blurring of the line
that's
between
not true. I've read all of the sentencing remarks for all of these people that were sentenced. It wasn't that they dared to disrupt. This was a collection of people who had backdrops of multiple previous convictions, up to 11 for the first guy. He was out on bail, essentially. Well, in fact, they were all out on bails. They breached injunctions. They showed no contrition whatsoever. They used their trial as a way of direct action process, direct action. They weren't sorry at all. And it wasn't just that they disrupted. It's that they conspired conspired to create absolute, complete gridlock. They wanted to bring the whole motorway system to a stop. That would have prevented law and order in this country. It would have prevented food supply in this country. There has to be limits. And actually, the maximum sentence that these guys could have got is 10 years. They got 5 years. Half of that they're going to serve in prison. The rest of it they will serve on licence. It is reflective as well of the fact that they want to take into consideration not just the harm that they caused, but the harm that they intended to cause. Personally, if I could find that judge and shake his hand and pat his back and give him a high five, I would. We disagree. What do you think to it at home?